Subscribe now, or else.
Hello. So we all know that Unreal Engine 5.2 was released. Now the question is it worth the hype? I would say absolutely yes. So I have this forest scene in my game that I need to build, which I've redone a couple of times because I wasn't really happy with it. And then I heard about procedurally generated content, which is now built into Unreal Engine, and I just had to give it a go. As soon as I started playing around with it, I realized how powerful it is, and I decided to make a tutorial as to how to use it. Let's jump straight in. Okay, so today we're playing around with procedural content generation, which is new in Unreal Engine 5.2. So this is going to be a step-by-step guide, so let's get to it. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is make sure that you have Unreal Engine 5.2.0. It's very important because otherwise you won't be able to use this tooling. Okay, so let's get started. So if you don't have that, you just select plus engine version and you select 5.2.0. It should be by default. Some people do have issues with the installed plugins. Just make sure that you install it in your C drive just for the time being. And then also the other thing is you just have to, if it doesn't work, install it for a second time, restart your machine, come back up. Some people have reported that it does solve the issue. That's only if you run into this issue where Quixel Bridge isn't installed by default. Cool, let's launch. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to select a games template. Let's do the third person template, and then I'm going to enable ray tracing. Now the reason I enable that ray tracing is then I get access to a bunch of features such as ray trace shadows and the path tracer, which I won't necessarily use, but I might. So just enable it if you do have an RTX card. So I'll just call it PCG third person. Okay. PCG again for procedural content generation. Okay, so now it's going to compile the shaders. So while the shaders are compiling, what I am going to do is I'm going to have a look at my library. So what we want to do is we want to, at the end of the day, create a forest scene. So let's just look for some free forest assets. So I remember getting some from Quixel Megascans. They are free. So here you will see Trees European. It seems like I have both of them installed. Let's just have a look at the various ones. So Black Alder, this is the one that I use quite often, but I think I'm actually just going to have a look at the other one because I'm quite interested to see what this one looks like. I can't remember if I've actually used this. Early access. Oh, that looks very nice. Okay, I haven't used this one before, so let's use this. You'll see that the supported engine version only goes up to 5.1, but it doesn't matter. I really do wish that they can just work on this launcher because it's extremely slow and it's just so clunky. Okay, we are in. Fantastic. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to go to plugins and we are going to look for procedural. There we go. And we are going to enable both these and it is going to require a engine restart. So now the first thing we need is we need a landscape. Now there's one of two ways that you can create a landscape. Let's just create a new level. Let's just do empty level, create. And we can go landscape and we just generate a landscape, right? So this will create a flat landscape for us that we can go and add mountains to with the sculpting tools and so on. Now while this is generating, I'll show you a different option, which is also free. In my opinion, it's far superior just because the details you can get in mountain is absolutely amazing. Now this is a freemium option. It's called Gaia. The paid for options allow for higher quality exports, but the 2K exports should be fine for the free edition for you. So you can just go mountain, and there you will have this kind of mountain setup, right? So in Unreal Engine, if we switch back here, you'll see a landscape tool. Okay, that's nice and all that, but I can now start sculpting this. If I really wanted to, for this purpose, we will be using Gaia. And it doesn't matter. Create your landscape as you want to. So what I can do is I'm going to mark this as export. Okay, and in export we will go and select PNG. I will select Unreal Engine. So Unreal Engine will just do the 2K option because that's what goes with the free version, and we will start build. I'll add the link to Gaia in the description as well. It's made by Quad Spinner, if I remember correctly. There we go. So this is the wizard.png, so that is our height map. Doesn't really look like much, but it is exactly what we need. So now if we go back to Unreal Engine, we can say import from file. We will look for that file, wizard, and now we just have to do a little bit of math. If we go back to Gaia and we go to terrain definition, you'll see the height is 2600 and the scale is 5000. So now we just have to translate that to Unreal Engine. So first of all, we're importing as 2017 by 2017, which is what we've set up. We will times that by 5000, which is the scale in Gaia, and then we'll divide that by that, and then we will get a size of 247. And then for the height, what we'll do is we'll just times that by 2600 divided by 512. And then there we have it matching what we want. The rest of the settings we are going to leave as default. And what you'll now see is a terrain. If we just add some light in here, you can open up your environmental light mixture. If you don't see that, just go to Window, open environmental light mixture, and then we can just go and add. I will not add the hide fog for now, just because it then blanks out some of my landscape. So let's move the camera speed up, and here you can see the landscape in Unreal Engine matching what we have in Gaia. Pretty cool, right? So I'm gonna exit this, and here we have a landscape. Simple, simple, simple. Okay, next thing we're gonna do is we are going to go into Content Browser. We will then go into Content and create a folder just to keep things neat as PCG. Okay, Procedural Content Generation. And what we will do is we will search, right-click, search for PCG graph. We will create that, give it a prefix PCG, and we will just call it PCG Forest. Now, if we open this, what you will notice is it looks a lot like blueprints, right? And or if you've worked with there used to be sound cues, it's now called meta sound. So if you're used to meta sounds, it looks very similar, and it works very similar, in fact, also. So now we have our PCG graph set up. What we're going to do is we're going to just save that. Let's save our map as well. Let's just create a new folder, maps, and we'll call it a forest. Cool, so everything is saved away. Now we will drag our PCG forest onto our map. And you'll notice nothing happens, which is quite normal because we haven't done anything yet. Cool, now let's go back to our Unreal Engine launcher, our Epic launcher, and we go and find a forest pack. So there's a couple of free ones. I wanted to use this Trees European. If you don't see your project in there, just select Show All Projects, and then you select the correct one, which is PCG third person, and it won't support your Unreal Engine version because nothing supports 5.2 as of yet. We'll just add it to the project. The next thing you'll see now, it starts downloading my project. The next thing I want to do is I want to start seeing if I can get some other cool. Here's forest path. Let's add forest path to our project as well. 5.1, add to project. Okay, the download might take some time, so while that's downloading, maybe I can take us through how this PCG sits together. So also while your content is downloading, let's talk about procedural graphs. The first thing we want to do is talk about the input node. The input node, we get a bunch of details. We can get the landscape or the landscape height. So basically this provides the height data, and this is just the landscape proxy. We're going to mostly be focusing on the landscape proxy. So now what we're going to do is we can sample. We want to sample the surface. So now what this does is it actually takes in the landscape and then gives us a little bit of transform information. So it will give us the ability to sample the landscape and then do some procedural tweaks. For instance, how dense the content would be that's generated on the surface. So now what we can do is if we enable debug and we save this, you will see now here we have some debug points within our PCG graph. This is where the spawning will happen. So if I open this up, just here, and I change, for instance, the points per square to 0.05, you'll see there is less content being generated. 0.1, fantastic, more, and then maybe we can drop this to 50, 50, 50, and you'll see there's more points now. I don't think pushing it up to 1, yes, pushing it up to 1 even more. So now you can see I have now controlled how many points spawn within this graph, and it's limited to this box. If you want to make it unbounded, you can do so in the surface sampler by checking that. It is resource intensive. Be very careful when you just click things within this procedural generator. Your Unreal Engine instance will crash. So remember, saving. This is still in beta. So let's talk about the next concept. The next node that we want to talk about is our transform points. Now what this does is it actually changes some sizes, so random sizes within our transform points. So let's just disable debugging. You can press D on this if you want to disable it quickly. So transform points, let's have a look at this. So what transform points does is I can now go in, let's just move this a little, let's make this a bit bigger so that we can all see what's going on. So what I can do is I can go and say, I want the rotation to be able to rotate 360 degrees. So now what you'll see is between 0 and 360 degrees, there will be random rotations. We can also set the max scale to 2. So now you'll see there's quite a few blocks, but you'll see that now there's random sizes. So let's just go back to our surface sampler and let's change this to 100, 100, 100, right? And let's just drop this to 0.5. Does that make a difference? 0.05. There we go. So now we have less items here. The next thing we want to do is we want to spawn some static meshes. You can spawn actors, blueprints, anything you'd like. It's really cool. You can spawn AI like this as well. And then out. Yeah, this is just if you want to reuse this graph as a subgraph, which we'll get into. So here you will see that we can now go and add mesh entries. So for the time being, let's just add a sample mesh entry. So there should be some things that comes with the PCG stuff. So just a sample tree. There we go. So here we have some trees that are spawned in the meantime, right? Let's just get this lighting looking a bit better. You can press Ctrl L to toggle the light. There we go. I like that. So here we go. We've got trees. So now the really cool thing is if I move this, it will regenerate these trees. Fantastic. Let's do that. There we go. That's working. And then we can also change the scale here. So if we look at our PCG forest, and we go to, where did I, there we go, transform. We can change this to like, let's do 100, right? And then you can also clean up and regenerate to make sure that everything is the way you want it. Now, of course, this can stretch the entire terrain, which I did in this video. I actually created trees that span this entire environment. Cool, let's see how we're looking here at, cool, fantastic. We have added it to the project. Let's go. So now what we can do is we should be able to see, first thing I want to do is make sure that we have nanite enabled. This is quite important because we're going to be spawning a lot of trees. As of 5.1 actually, foliage can have nanite enabled. And that means that we can spawn a ridiculous amount of foliage, which is going to be really useful for building massive forests. It's just now recreating those meshes as nanite meshes, just transforming those meshes to nanite meshes. This might take a little bit of time. Half of the time in Unreal spent I've found is looking at a screen while it's loading. Fantastic, it's complete. Now it's just preparing the static meshes. Cool, so what we can do now in the PCG forest, let's open this up here again. We should be able to go down to our mesh and look for a tree. Or actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the content browser. I don't have enough space, guys, I'm sorry. So we're going to go into European Hornbeam, Pivot Painter, and then we can move in a tree into this section. Yeah, now it's going to build the geometry once again. It's very difficult to speedrun something if you're kind of hampered by slow loading times, but I guess these assets are massive. There we go. Done. Now we should see some trees. There we go. Here we have a procedural forest. So let's just wait for the textures to load. There we go. Textures are loaded. Still preparing the static meshes. And there we've got like quite a very dense forest. Also, lighting is a bit annoying now, I guess. There we go. There we have a very, very thick and luscious forest. So now what we can do is, obviously you don't just want one tree, we can add multiple trees. So let's go into our content browser again. Let's like look for something a bit smaller. Let's go and add another one. Let's maybe do like a longer one. And then what's really nice about this is you can set the weight. So if I set the weight to 2, it means there's going to be more of these like long skinny trees. Now, what is interesting is that this forest is far too dense. So let's just reduce the density here. And remember, we can go back to our sprite sampler and we can maybe turn this down to like 0.1. Okay, there we go. That's looking a bit more realistic. So here we have a forest, very simply spawned, and now what we can do is, depending on your system, I'm gonna try and push this up like to maybe like 250. Seems about right. So you'll now see that it just spawns a bigger area. Cool, fantastic. First step done. Now, this floor doesn't really look very convincing as a forest. I'm not going to be adding a floor material, blend material. I'm just going to be adding stuff to the floor. If you want to see how that works, there are some other videos that you can check out on my channel. I will just link here to the top. Can't ever remember which side it is. Anyway, so now what we're going to do is we are going to go back to our graph. So we'll go to our forest environment. We'll go to our PCG. And we will create a PCG graph, PCG, and we're going to call this PCG forest floor. Okay, now in here, same thing, we will be using the landscape. We will do a surface sampler. We will do a transform points. And what we will then do is we will add debug here, and within our original forest PCG, we will do subgraph. And then what we can do is we can select a subgraph here, which would be our forest floor. And what we should then see technically is, let me just forest floor. I did add debugging. But I think what we need to do is just landscape in. And there you go. There you'll see our subgraph is sampling. And now what we want to do here is inside of our forest floor, we want to change the seed maybe to something like 500 or whatever it is, just so that it doesn't spawn on the same places. But you'll see that there are still overlap over the trees. And what we want to do is we want to, before we spawn the mesh, we want to subtract or use the difference between the forest floor and trees to avoid overlapping. So now you can see this is a little bit of overlapping due to size, but it's not being spawned on the same places as the trees anymore. Okay, well, there is one. You know why? Because we're not doing this. We need the output. Okay, well, let's spawn our static meshes. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get some meshes from our forest path. Granite, old stump, lichen, 3D plant, dead leaves. Okay, so let's add some rocks here. Mesh entries, let's like add 3 things here. Let's add some. Let's just pin this to make our lives easier. So we're gonna go into Parse tutorial. Let's get to 3D granite, and we're gonna drag our granite up here. We're gonna add another mesh, and we're gonna add maybe like this old. No, I don't like that old stump. Yeah, I'll use this stump. Maybe we can add a little bit of foliage as well from the European hornbeam. There was some foliage here. And then let's add some more things. We've got some forest floors that we're generating, which is fantastic. So now what we want to do is maybe we want to increase the amount of how dense it is, right? So let's go to forest floor, mesh spawner out. There we go. Now it's not spawning over each other because there we go. Fantastic. I forgot to connect the output. Okay, fantastic. We're going to go into the forest floor and we are going to change our sampling to like 10, and we should have a bit more. So now you can see there we have, it's a little bit more dense. So let's just move our forest floor to here, select this, let's play around with this a little bit. Let's change this to like 1. Okay, cool. Now it's just going to generate more assets, and there we go. There we've got like a very dense forest floor. I think there's too many of these rocks, so now what we can do is we can go back into our forest floor, and we can go into our sprite spawner, and here we can start playing with the weights. So I really like the foliage here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the weights to like 10, maybe a bit more foliage here as well. This is also foliage. Oh, my PC is pulling weight here. If this is happening on your PC, just lower the size of this graph on your scene. Let's do one more, another tree or another piece of foliage. Cool, it's just generating the graph. And there we go. Here we've got like a very rich looking forest floor. And what we can do now is we should be able to play and see what this looks like in real time. Here we go. How cool is that? So that's it for this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, happy game development. Until next time.